Hello, everybody, and welcome to WBGO Studios. My name is Gary Walker, and today we're going to take a trip. You don't have to pack your bags, but we're going to take a trip to Philadelphia. We're going to talk to one of Philadelphia's own fabulous drummer who grew up in the sounds of brotherly love around Freddie Hubbard and Randy Weston and the Heath brothers, South Philadelphia. But for Vince Ector, it didn't start in South Philadelphia. It actually started in West Philadelphia. And we're going to talk to him today about some of those early times when his father would take him to a place called Dino's and drop him off and wait for him while he went in and enjoyed the organ of Don Patterson. Vince Ector, hello and welcome to WBGO Studios.
Hello, Gary. How are you? Hello, listeners.
I'm great.
Great to be here.
I bet you still remember those days, don't you?
I do. I can see it just like it was yesterday. It's amazing.
Talk about that, man. What was the feeling? How old were you?
I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I remember the steps. They had steps. So I thought about it later on and I said, they actually had to carry the B3 up the steps to get up there. Amazing. Maybe 30 steps.
Now, was that the place that kind of looked like an old house?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was Morgan's. That was another one. I'll give you that story. That's a Charles Erlin story, yes, but not as many steps. But I guess that was a common denominator in Philadelphia and some of these real joints is that you had to actually go upstairs. So maybe someone can fill us in on that. Why was that?
But sometimes, and we're talking about going to see Don Patterson, and many times it was just a duo. It was like Don Patterson and Bobby Durham.
Exactly. That's who was there that day. It was just Bobby and Don. And wow, if I had understood the significance of that at the time, I probably would have ran out of there screaming for my life. It was just incredible to see. Amazing.
Well, I think over the years you have understood the significance, considering the cat we're talking to here has done work with Freddie Hubbard and Randy Weston and Houston Person and Gloria Lynn. And I remember those great nights at the Priory with Charles Erlin, and behind the drum kit, making it smoke with the mighty burner was Vince Ector. And he's got a brand new recording out that was captured live at a place called the Side Door up in Connecticut. And we're going to put it front and center here as we chat about Organatomy Trio Plus. And we're going to talk about the plus too, because that's also an integral part of something that means a whole lot to Vince Ector. Talk about this recording and how this trio came together, and then we'll talk about the plus.
Well, it's funny. Right before the pandemic, I had a recording out called Theme for Miss P. And this was 2019, and we were building up a lot of steam with the recording. We were getting a lot of plays, and we started getting some concerts. And
you were also getting play at home because your mom, that's Mrs. P.
That's right.
That's
who
Miss Pat. Who the record was dedicated to was your mom, Pat.
Exactly. And everyone that knows my mom knows Miss Pat. My mother was the secretary of the local elementary school where I grew up, and most of the children, and then their children, and then their grandchildren in the neighborhood. So there are probably some folks listening now that have grandchildren that actually attend McDaniel School, where my mother was the secretary for 30 years. So she was known as Miss Pat. I just couldn't call her Pat, so I substituted the Pat for the P, and she said that was fine. So, my mom really liked it, and we're getting a lot of steam on it, and we decided, hey, let's run some concerts and see what happens. So we'd already been working for quite a bit, and the front line was Bruce Williams, it was Pat Bianchi, and Paul Bollenbach. So we had a gig at the Side Door on January 6, 2020. And unfortunately, Bruce had to have a procedure done. And he's a busy person like I am. So he said, look, I'll get this done over the holidays. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play for a few weeks. So he called Justin Jones, who was his student at Juilliard. He had graduated already. And Justin learned all of the music. I think we had one rehearsal. And we did the concert not knowing that it was actually going to be recorded. So fast forward into the pandemic, I'm sitting at home like everyone else, depressed, and everything is shut down and it's just a mess. And Ken Kitchens emails me. I don't know if he emailed or called me. He says, listen, we recorded that night. I want to send it to you. Let us know what you think. So he did. And I sat on it for another 2 months maybe. And I finally started listening. And I realized that we could do something with it. So I held it for almost the whole pandemic. And I just procrastinated. Should I do it? Should I not do it? And I'm trying to write new music. Everything is coming out really dark and sad. I said, no, we got to stop this now, like everything. So I decided, let's just edit it down, because as you know, Gary, the live recordings, they're pretty long. The tunes are long, so no one's going to play them. We have to chop them down. So this recording, there's no mixing. It's straight to the board. We only edited the timing down, so eliminate a solo here and there. So it's just as if you were there that night. There's no additions, no changes, no nothing. So that's the long and short. So thank you, Ken, for sending that. You actually saved us from the pandemic with it.
So the new recording is yourself and Justin Jones and Paul Bolenbach and Pat Bianchi. And Paul and Pat and you have worked together for quite some time. People may have the misunderstanding, though, that Vince Ector is an organ drummer. And just an organ drummer. Well, go to his first 2 records. They didn't even have an organ on the records. And go even beyond that to his training period. There was, various schools around. He left and then went back to William Patterson. We'll talk about that. But you really get that training. One time, Keith Jarrett told me that, his biggest form of training was playing at weddings. Because people would come up and ask for things and you never knew what they were going to ask for. Well, for you, it might have been a stint in the Army in Texas, Fort Bliss. Now, don't confuse that, because, there ain't no bliss in the fort. But when the musicians got out and played various things, and it'd be all kinds of things like weddings and ceremonies and all that, you always had to be on your toes and know what you were going to play. And that diversity had to serve you well during your time after, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we played polkas. I did marches. When I graduated from basic training, I actually played a change of command ceremony a week later, and then I went back to the same basic training area to play the graduation for the next class as a corporal. So now I'll go from a PFC to a corporal, which is an NCO. And when my drill sergeants saw me, they almost leveled me. They couldn't believe it. What are you doing with stripes, Ector? And so, long story short, I go back, play another change of command ceremony, lock my knees on the bass drum, and pass out. So I wake up, 20 minutes later, and I'm on my back with this huge bass drum in front of me. So I never did that again, but it was a learning experience. So, but again, polkas, marches, parades, jazz combo, concert band, just about anything. I mean, it's a great opportunity. My only regret is that I didn't stay longer, because I signed up for a reserve option. So they extended my orders as long as they could, and then I had to leave. But if I could do it again, I would have stayed there for quite some time. It was a beautiful time.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. And it does provide that diversity that is necessary in many cases to be a working musician, because, it's not a jazz gig every single day of the week.
Not at all.
Sometimes it's other things that you got to be doing, and you got to be prepared for them. When you consider you wouldn't play the same for a Randy Weston or a Charles Earland that you would for a James Reese Europe performance. And you've got one of those coming up with TK Blue next month, I believe.
That's correct.
In the month of April.
That's
so
correct.
We're chatting with Vince Ector, but I go back to the home here for just a moment. Your daddy was a piano player and had some pretty decent friends in the world of piano playing. Barry Harris being one of them, huh?
Yeah, Barry was his dear friend. And every time I would see Barry, he would look at me. He said, "Your dad played just like Bud Powell." He played just like Bud Powell. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, coming from Barry Harris. So I think what happened with my dad, he came to New York at a time when everyone was here. And can you imagine if you play piano and Monk is here, Barry's here, like everyone is here? I think he might have decided that it was a little too much, and he was always a family man. So he stayed for a while, and he came back to Philly fortunately, because I wouldn't be sitting here today had he not have done that. And he raised us, but he always kept the music in his heart. So what he would do is he would book bands at the postal card. And it was funny because I saw Mona Heath not too long ago, and she reminded me, she said, I used to sit at that bar with your father and watch Billie Holiday. So like everyone came to Philly, and he was responsible for bringing a lot of the artists there as well.
You know, it's interesting that on this new recording that's just come out, Organatomy Trio Plus live at the side door, Vince Ector. The very first track on the album is the South Philly Groove. Now, that's an original, that's one of yours, but talk about the South Philly Groove.
Okay. South Philly is a place that has a little bit of everything. And one of the things that they had was Charles Erlin, whom I met indirectly through his niece, who was my pediatrician's secretary. So every year, from the time I can remember going to the doctor, she would be at the front desk and she would say, Uncle Charlie has a new recording out. I know you play drums every year. Uncle Charlie has another one. And she would give me recordings. And it went on and on and on. And one day I got a phone call from Charles Erlin. Hey, Ector. That's what he called me, Ector. I heard you play drums. Do you want to do this gig with me up at Morgan's in Germantown? So, of course, I'm there. The thing about Morgan's is that they didn't have drums. And it was on the third floor, not the second floor. So I would take my red Premier drums at the time with the 22-inch bass drum. The drummers know that's a huge bass drum. And I would carry my stuff up to that third floor. And I got to play with Charles Erlin. And then he just kept calling and kept calling. And the rest is history.
Now, let me ask you, the obvious question, because, I helped a cat in Chicago once lift a Hammond B3 up on a stage, and it threw my back out.
Yeah.
It still goes out every now and then, and that was almost 40 years ago.
Woo.
Did you have to help carry the B3 up all those stairs?
Thank goodness no, because as a drummer, I was there 2 hours before they even thought about bringing that B3 up the steps. And when I got my drums up to the top, I just stayed there. I didn't show my face until it was showtime.
Until the end of the gig.
Exactly.
No,
So I knew better. I knew.
I get it. You also paid tribute to a guy we referenced earlier in our conversation today, and that's Don Patterson with a piece of his called Sister Ruth.
Yes. I mean, Don, he was the fabric of the town at the time when I was coming up, as a child. And really, I think he might have been the first organist that I actually saw live that day at Dino's. I think he was the first. So he had a real impression on me. And, I had covered Aries previously in one of my recordings. And, it was something that, like, most people know Jimmy Smith and they know others, but Don Patterson, he was very unique. And he, as you know, he was on Muse Records for a long time. So he was here in New York and back and forth. But he's somebody that I felt was kind of overlooked. Not too much, but some folks didn't really know who he was. So I felt it was an opportunity to like put that out there. And I thought he did a lot in such a little time. He died really young. So I wanted to pay tribute to him as well with these recordings. So we actually chose to do another one. And I think it might have been at Pat's suggestion because Pat is a big fan.
That's great that you pay tribute because, you look at people like Don Patterson or like Sonny Phillips, for example. And, those are names that, for some reason have been horribly overlooked over the years.
Yes,
I tried when I first started at BGO, Bob Porter used to follow me on Saturdays. And I said, I know Bob. And when I got to know him, because we saw each other once a week, I said, I'd really, and I understand you're working now, but I'd really like to go to a recording date at Rudy Van Gelder's. And he kind of went, eh. And so about 6 months later, I'm at home in New York, where I lived at the time, and the phone rang on a Friday night. And my wife said, there's a Bob Porter on the phone for you. And I had the flu, man. I was sick as a dog. And so I picked up the phone but Walker, it's Porter. I got a McGriff date tomorrow. Van Gelders, be under the be at the bus station under the GWB at 10:30. Well, there wasn't any way in hell I was going to miss that.
Yeah.
So I got there that next morning, and it was Bob Parent, who was a photographer who was there to take the album cover art. So we get to Van Gelders, and I walk in the door. I mean, I've got the flu, man.
Wow.
And I walk in the door, and there's one of your buddies, Melvin Sparks. And he's
Spark
standing
plug.
there. He's standing there, and he takes one look at me, and he says, "Here, have some breakfast." And he hands me like a plastic cup like this, and it's full of bourbon. It's like 10:30 in the morning. And I drank the whole cup. And you know what? I felt better. And you know what else? I ended up on the record.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was McGriff's record called Countdown. And he did a version of I'm Walking. And so they did the thing, right? I'm walking. Yes, indeed. Right. So they did the thing, and they get done. And Van Gelder comes out, Rudy comes out and says, "What do you think?" He said, "I wanted it to feel more like church." So they huddled for a minute, and then they said, "Okay, you. And he points to me and he goes, "You go up and stand behind each one of those microphones. And we're going to play the track back. And when we get to it, you can keep time, can't you?" Yeah. Okay. When we get to this one point, we want you to just start clapping like that.
Yeah.
And we ended up on the track.
That's beautiful. Now I have to pull that out now. I didn't know that, Gary. That's fantastic.
Countdown, man. Countdown.
You didn't touch the microphones, did you? At Rudy's place? Good. Okay.
Oh, no.
You know about that.
I knew better than that. I'd be waiting out in the parking lot if I did that.
Yes, sir. Unbelievable.
We're chatting with Vince Ector here on the WBGO studios. And, I think about, a young guy like Justin Jones, and you picked a tune here made very popular by the Delphonics.
Yes.
Right? Love Won't Let Me Wait. And you know who was in the Delphonics? Christian McBride's daddy.
Lee Smith.
Lee Smith was a bass player with the Delphonics for a long time, Mongo Santa Maria and other people too. But I
never knew that.
At that time. Yeah.
It's funny because my frame of reference was always the Major Harris version. I didn't even know that they had recorded that. I guess it had to be prior to.
Yeah.
With the Delphonics. So that's an interesting fact. And Christian's dad is a great bass player.
Yes,
we had worked quite a bit together when I was living in Philadelphia. So shout out to Lee Smith.
Philadelphia, man, provides such a strong foundation. I went to a 50th anniversary party for Ray Bryant in Philadelphia, and everybody got a t-shirt, right? And the t-shirt was a picture of Ray and Penny Golson and John Coltrane, and I forget who else, when they were teenagers, man. They had like a garage band together.
What's funny, the Heath brothers lived around the corner from my grandmother's house where my dad grew up. So my father was closer to their age. My father was born in 1931. My mother is much younger, but they all kind of went to the same schools at different times and walked the streets together. So the community in South Philly, I just wanted to tag on to the part about Charles. I mean, it encompasses so many people. The Heath brothers, you had Mickey Roker there, who it's funny, I was able to see him before he passed because I was hired for a concert across the street from his home at a park, which was never a park. It was always housing. And my dad used to take me by Mickey's house. It was his best friend. And he would stand outside of his house and shout, "Granville." And Mickey would come out and say, "Shh, don't say that too loud. I don't want people to know my name." So I remember those days. So to see him sitting out there on his step when we pulled up to play that concert, it was something that it was a full circle moment for me. And I miss him dearly. He was like a second father to me.
And that kind of support when you're starting out, because when you were starting out, I mean, it was after you got out of the service and stuff, it would be, I'll come to New York, I'll run out of money, I'll go
Yeah.
back to Philly. I'll
Yes.
come to New York, I'll run out of money, I'll go back to Philly. So back and forth was, which, you can imagine, folks. I mean, is his own tension convention. How did
Yes.
you work through that as a musician?
Man, that was really, it was tough because I did that, back and forth, run out, go back. Fortunately, I was at a point in my career where I was getting better because when I was in Philadelphia, I came up playing R&B music. So I didn't really start R&B and funk. I didn't really start playing jazz until I was 19 or 20 years old. I mean, really playing it. I mean, I played with my dad, but it was kind of under duress. He would play tunes and I would want to play you know, bass, play funk bass, play, with the thumb and plucking and slapping because I also play bass. So it was kind of I guess it was a protest, a childhood protest. But anyway, by the time I got to New York, I think I was about 27, 28. Uh, I was starting to really develop. So I was able to come back and still work. So it was good. I would come to New York, really get challenged, and then go back to Philly and then play and then come back to New York. And as you know, Gary, during that time, I came in 1994-ish. Every gig was a week long. So I had enough time to make a few dollars and stay and, go around and try to see everyone, which is where all the money went, of course, and then run back to Philadelphia and kind of recoup. And
Yeah.
that went on until I decided to come permanently. So
Well,
that's
and the scene was such because you had Smalls, you had Bradleys. We still got Smalls, but you had, big bands that would come together. Jason Lindner, for example, early
exactly.
on, you hooked up with those guys, and through all those guys, you met other guys, you met other guys, and that's how you do it. You network. Does that kind of communal experience exist today in the year 2023?
Whew, that's a tough one. Uh, it's funny. I mean, I can't really speak for the generation that I was that exists now, the 20-year-olds, 20, 30-year-olds. But it seemed to me that during that time it was really special because I mean, there were so many guys that were really interested in just being together and playing. And we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Twitter, there's no Netflix. So you had to really go out and show your face. And by showing your face, even if you didn't decide to play, you heard so much music at a high level and it was humbling. So then you would go home and practice. So it's a little different now. You get to do this virtually. So I can't really speak for them, but as far as my generation now, I mean, we still see each other and we get together, but maybe we should have something really big. Maybe one of those really significant festivals that you guys used to have. When I came here, you guys used to have a festival, and that's when I met a lot of people. I think it was at Newark Symphony Hall. Do you remember that, Gary? Maybe
Yeah,
94, 95?
we had ongoing series, but we also had our jazzathons, that would run at the
Right,
Village Gate and other places that would be like 18 to 24, sometimes 36 hours of
right.
live music. But you referenced the 90s there. When you come to New York, I mean, you got to see Billy Higgins, you got to see Tony Williams, right?
Yes.
You got to see all these Elvin Jones, you got to see all these cats that
Boom. Yes.
were, the idols of the of rhythm, right?
Absolutely. I think more importantly, I got to feel them through my body. When Art Blakey would play Sweet Basil, I mean, you felt him through the floor and it just went through your bones. You can't get that in a video. So I
No,
think
you
that's
can't.
important too, right?
Absolutely. I remember seeing Art Blakey and the Messengers when the front line was Terrence Blanchard and Donald Harrison up at McCall's up there at Columbus and 90th.
Wow.
And it was like, here I am sitting and here's Art Blakey. Right? You talk about feeling it.
You felt it.
It's something I'll never forget. We're chatting with Vince Ector on the WBGO studios. The new record has just come out, Organatomy Trio Plus, captured live at the Side Door up in Connecticut. And as we take it aside, you referenced and you said, R&B and funk was a big part of who you were. There's a track on here that Renewal Revisited that kind of reminds me of the soundtrack of Shaft in a way.
Yeah.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
It's got that funky thing happening, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. That's the plus. That is actually the plus. That's the plus. Because this revisited, I recorded this before. And I always said to myself, this needed what we used to call this a shacking guitar. Learn how to shack. Guy would ask you, can you shack? And that's that strumming that you hear Paul doing. Now, Paul's from Baltimore, so he might as well be from Philly. He has that. So I said, this needs that. And so I called Paul Ballenbeck. I said, I need you to record a couple tracks. Remember the theme from Miss P? We did half with the trio and we did half with the plus. And we added that guitar. Now, fast forward to the live record, we're supporting that recording. So, of course, we're going to do that. So when I heard it, I said, we have to include it because it had really developed at that point. That's the plus, that guitar. And that was a guitar style that I grew up in and that was prevalent all over Philadelphia when I was coming up. Anybody, if you couldn't read music and you could shack, you can work. So it's a big deal.
Shacking. I love that.
Shacking.
Yeah, I love that.
Some folks have different names for it. We call it shacking or shack in.
Yeah, I like that. And it's on this new recording captured live at the side door, Vince Ector on WBGO Studios. Wives and Lovers, Burt Bacharach and Hal David. We just lost Burt Bacharach.
Yes.
Talk about that tune. Where did you first hear that, and how did that tune influence you?
I'm a big Burt Bacharach fan, so his tunes lend themselves well to our style of music, which is jazz. So I decided I'm going to do a Burt Bacharach tune. That wasn't the only one. I've played a few different ones, but when I was coming up, this was what was on the radio. And of course, Dionne Warwick, whom I love. I love pop music. I have to admit, I'm a pop music fan. So it was easy for me. I mean, if it has a good melody, I'm interested. And Burt's tunes really lend themselves well to recording in this style. And I decided, let's just do that one. There's a few more. I'm not going to mention them because I might do that on the next project, but we will see. But in any event, Burt, I mean, it's the soundtrack of some of our lives, to be honest. And I know, I have an older sister. So my sister used to have a lot of records that I didn't necessarily purchase myself, and I would take them. And
now, is that Dex?
That's Dex. That's Dex.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We got a tune on here too that Vince wrote for his sister called Dex Blues. I take it she's a big blues fan.
Yeah, she loves the blues, and her Dex is her nickname. She was married, and her name was changed from Ector to Dexter, so we call her Dex, and it kind of stuck. So I'm sure, hopefully she's listening. Hi, Dex. But that's for her. But in any event, she informed a lot of my development musically because I would take her albums, and I guess I'm admitting it on the air now, and she knows. So, but she had, the New Birth. She had a bunch of Burt Bacharach, and she had, things that I wasn't necessarily ready for, but I was able to access them through her collection, and I would borrow a few, and that's where the Burt Bacharach came from.
And later on, of course, that kind of reimagination was apparent all the time with Charles Earland.
Absolutely.
I love you more today than yesterday. You make me feel, even Michael Jackson, he would go after it and go after it in the right way, man.
Incredible. I really attribute that to growing up in Philadelphia. We just never separated styles. Like people say jazz, blues, funk, hip hop, R&B, band, whatever. For Philadelphia musicians, it's just everything because we had to play everything in order to survive. Singing groups, funk bands, jazz, organ trio, quartet, big band, anything. You had to be ready for that. And you'd be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of really, really, really accomplished artists there that can play styles that you would never guess. So,
when we talk about something like that, about playing this and playing that and playing that, that is also the way to approach the arts in general. And it moves my line of questioning here to
Yes.
something else that is extremely important to you. And that's the Arts for Kids program that kind of is a sense memory for you when you think of Mr. Carr and GAMP, which
Yeah.
was a big influence in your life coming up as a little kid. It's a place you used to go, and Mr. Carr, and you were introduced to all kinds of different types of musics and art form. And now each one teach one. You're doing the same thing with your program, Arts for Kids. Talk about that.
That's correct. So Arts for Kids was something that my wife Karen and I started in our apartment at the time in Patterson. We started to go out and work as teaching artists. And what a teaching artist does is that they go into the school and they present their art to the classroom, not as the resident artist teacher, but just a visitor, what we call a teaching residency. And it's not limited to music, dance, drama, visual art. We do technology, coding, robotics, goes on and on. However, we started to see that a lot of the really, really good artists that we knew that could do that work weren't doing it. So we wanted to give them an outlet to actually go in. And what's good about it is that you can do this for a limited period of time. You can still tour and travel if you travel. You can still work on your fellowships if you have one. And you can do it within your schedule. But the plus side of it is actually that the kid gets to see someone that looks like them teaching the art form as a professional. So not necessarily thinking that they're going to become this artist, but it's going to impact their lives in a positive way. So that was our goal in the beginning. And we just kept it going. And fast forward to, the pandemic, we're sitting around and we're sulking about the world and watching too much news as everyone else is. And we started writing grants again. We're both skilled grant writers. And before you know it, we're writing these grants, we're getting grants, and we're putting artists in spaces virtually during the pandemic, which scaled us up. And then we continue today. We're statewide. So we're going from Patterson to Camden right now. We have programs in seven counties of New Jersey. We used to be in New York City a lot with our sole source license. And I think we're going to redo that. But what happened was that the work actually shifted to New Jersey, and it just became so big that we decided to consolidate our efforts here in the state. So
what is the age range for people watching this right now?
We go pre-K through 12. So we do a lot of early childhood work, pre-K, K. It's considered pre-K, K1, 2, and 3. Moving on up, we have a lot of middle school. Right now, we're just about all over the place. We have a few high schools now. We're in the middle. Mostly, we're heavy elementary, but elementary it changes according to the area of the state that you're in. So concentrated, 3 to 6th or 7th grade, a lot of that. But we also have the early childhood as well. So, to be honest, Gary, we're all over the place. We're everywhere we can go.
And the primary school kids, they are the hardest to fool.
Yeah.
Right. So
yes, they are.
That kind of keeps you on your toes and, keeps that syllabus together nice and tweaked, right? That you could apply to all the age groups. Now, for you, it was GAMP. What does GAMP stand for?
Girard Academic Music Program.
Mr. Carr, talk
Mr.
about
Carr,
that.
Who is Dr. Carr now, I understand, but he's still Mr. Carr to me. His name is Jack Carr. Jack Carr was a friend of my mother's. My mother, as I stated earlier, was a secretary. And I guess he used to pass through her office a lot. He might have been working at McDaniel as a music teacher at some point. I was very young. So when he came and started that school, I was in the 3rd grade. So he knew I played music, and he asked my mom, would you like him to come with me? I'm starting something new. In my mind, I'm thinking he's probably the beginning of one of the first charter schools in Philadelphia, because we fundraised. I mean, we were at first we were in a church basement, then we were in an armory, and then they finally got their own building. I decided to go to Central High School. I guess I wanted a real high school, but I'm glad I went. But in hindsight, it was something special that I didn't quite grasp the way I should have. But he was a trailblazer, and I think our organization is kind of based around that, going into these spaces in a way that's not traditional, but having an impact. And now I'm way over my age limit. I'm not going to say how old I am today, but these many years later, I'm still talking about this man that had an impact on my life in the third grade. So it mattered. It really mattered. So I think that's what guides us now, catching the kids young and really making an impact. Whether or not you're going to become an artist, it doesn't really matter. But you see these people that care about you. He would bring in teaching assistants. I remember them coming in from Temple University. We would go there on a Saturday and take classes, and just involving the community as a whole, college students, parents, friends, family. We would go to his home and have these retreats. It was amazing. So yeah, I think there's a legacy there, and we try to keep that going. I'm trying to do that here in my own life.
Well,
Absolutely.
in addition to the music, we're chatting with Vince Ector, Organatomy Trio Plus, live at the side door is the new recording. But you can go in the front door and see them live for yourself. During the month of April, they're going to be at Porta Montclair on Bloomfield Avenue in Montclair on the 13th. And then 3 days later, on the 16th, they're going to celebrate this new recording with a performance at SoPac in South Orange, New Jersey. And then you got a whole bunch of other stuff lined up in the months ahead. Vince Ector, you can find out more about everything he's involved with at vinceector.com. And what a treat to chat with you here today. Final question. You're in your car.
My treat as well, Gary.
You're in your car. Karen's probably with you. And you're driving down the road. Where are you going? And what are you listening to inside the car?
Ooh, that's a good question. We go to a lot of places. Let's say, okay, we're in the car. We're going to be going to Montreal. We like to drive up there sometime. And we're listening to you, of course. Yes, we are. And now, are you saying music-wise or station-wise or
music-wise? Yeah, you got your own choices, man. You're not locked into what we're doing. You got your own choice. And from here to Montreal, boy, you got a lot of records with you. I know.
Let me tell you, we listen to jazz. We listen to pop. We like R&B, 80s. We're kind of into that thing. We like 70s, R&B. We like older pop music. Sometimes we listen to talk radio, just a little bit. But it's weird because we're not limited. I could just press a button and she's fine with it, and so am I. So we're really like chameleons when it comes to music. We listen to everything, and I'm hoping that folks can hear that in my own music. I don't like to just put everything into one category. You're going to hear a lot in what I'm putting out. So to answer that question, yeah, it could be anything, Gary. It's really,
I know
it's interesting.
I know there's a lot of singing going on because I used to see Karen perform in front of her own groups from time to time.
Exactly.
And, just marvelous, man. I always loved what she did. And
thank you.
Looking one generation down, some people call it DNA. Yeah. I think in Vince Ector's world, it's DNE. Do nothing else. Because his daughter, Michaela is also a very accomplished musician. What's she doing these days?
And Melody. So I'll start from the top. Since Melody is the oldest, I'll have to talk about her first. But right before the pandemic, we went to see Melody perform on Saturday Night Live, which was like a dream, something that I had never done. So it was the Thanksgiving Saturday Night Live episode with Will Ferrell, features my daughter performing with King Princess. So we went down and we saw her and we took these pictures, and then you don't know that they do it twice. I asked Melody to come down and see the house band rehearse because I knew that, Teray and Ryan Blake and the guys were in that band and they were going to be dealing. So I said, listen, why don't you come down early? I'll meet you there and just see what they do because you need to see this. And she did. She was on tour. She was tired and she came down and she did it. They do the show once, we watch it there, then they do it again, and we go home and watch. So that's what she's doing. She's touring. She's with pop artists. She's all over the place, living in LA. along with McKaylee. They are roommates now. McKaylee is actually going back to school. She was here at William Patterson for a year and studying under Vincent Herring, which was great. She got an opportunity to do that. And then she decided to go to LA because she's selling what they call beats, and she has a manager now. So I said, why don't you just go out there and just stay with your sister and make music? So that's what they're doing, Gary. They're making music in LA, and we're here, FaceTiming them and pushing them on. So it's a beautiful thing to see, really beautiful thing to see. And I'm really proud of them.
And it's a beautiful thing to be around. Vince Ector, he had Mr. Carr. Christian McBride, he had Lovett Hines growing up in Philadelphia. And the young folk today, because of Arts for Kids, they have people like Vince Ector. And how would the young people get in touch with you about the Arts for Kids program?
Yes, we have a site. It's www.artsforkidsinc.org, as in incorporated. artsforkidsinc.org. You can find us there. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Arts for Kids Inc. Please reach out to us. We'll see if we can make something happen for you. And we do have a community page there as well, which will let you know about events that are going on around you that might be free, that might not necessarily involve us, but that we feel that they're accessible to the community. So we're a community-based organization, and we want to promote that as well.
Excellent. And I'll tell you, folks, if you want to put a little rhythm in your riff, this is a cat you want to go see, is Vince Ector. You want to go see him, because we didn't even get to what they did with Dizzy Gillespie's Con Alma, or the beautiful composition by Benny Carter, The Courtship. I mean, it's all on this new record. Organotomy Trio live at the side door. Vince Ector walking in the front door here with us at the WBGO studios. Thank you so much, sir, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, WBGO and your listeners. And thank you to all the fans out here of the music. We really, 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 really appreciate you. Thanks for having me here today.